gagawin mo sa akin yung ginagawa niyo ni Ate Shion.
The movie opens in the Philippines. A desperate mother named Lineth embarks on a harrowing journey to find her missing husband. Her journey is not just a search for her husband, but a quest for survival, hope, and a better life for her child. Lineth, a penniless young woman, stands at the bus terminal, looking lost and frustrated because she doesn't have enough money for the bus fare. Her child cries in her arms, and the weight of her struggle presses down on her. Just as Lineth's hope seems to wither, fate steps in. A lady in the crowded terminal drops her purse. Lineth quickly picks it up and returns it to the woman. The lady, grateful for her act of kindness, praises Lineth's honesty. In response, Lineth requests a favor to be taken to the main bus stand. Sensing the struggle in Lineth's eyes, the woman agrees to give her a ride to the bus stand. This moment, while small, gives Lineth a sliver of hope. With the lady's help, Lineth boards a bus to Manila, clutching her infant tightly. She sits quietly in a corner, exhausted from her journey already, and begins feeding her baby. As she does, the shadows of her new reality creep up on her. A middle-aged man accompanied by two friends begins to harass her with lewd comments and unwanted offers. But before things can escalate, a muscular man enters the bus wielding a gun. The man's presence is enough to scare the troublemakers away, as they mistake him for a policeman. They quickly vacate their seats, leaving Lineth in peace for the moment. Lineth stares at the man, who later introduces himself as Rod. As the bus moves on, Lineth starts to panic. The bus conductor is collecting fares from passengers, and she realizes she still doesn't have enough money to pay. Her heart races as the conductor comes closer. With nowhere else to turn, she hurriedly asks Rod for help, thinking he's a policeman. But Rod surprises her by admitting he's not an officer at all. He had only pretended to scare away the men earlier. Still, he reassures Lineth by offering to pay her fare. Grateful for his kindness, Lineth introduces herself to Rod. She explains that she's headed to Manila to find her husband after losing everything in a devastating typhoon. Her life has been a constant struggle, and now she's determined to find her husband for the sake of her child. As the bus rolls through the countryside, Lineth begins to feel a small sense of safety with Rod. For the first time in a long time, she lets her guard down, and they begin to talk more openly. Rod, intrigued by Lineth, asks her about her past. After a pause, Lineth begins to open up about the hardships she has endured. She recounts the day her father died in a tragic road accident when she was just 5 years old. That event shattered her family. Her mother, unable to cope, spiraled into deep trauma and developed a severe mental disorder. Only months later, her mother tragically took her own life, leaving Lineth and her brother orphaned. The siblings were taken in by one of their aunts, but life didn't get any easier. One day, Lineth's aunt took her brother and sold him for money. Lineth, only a child and deeply vulnerable, could do nothing to stop it. She was told her brother could not be found, but she knew the truth. Her voice quivers as she recalls these painful memories, and Rod listens intently, showing empathy for her suffering. Rod offers Lineth some food and water to comfort her, and after a brief pause, she continues her story. As time passed, Lineth grew up in her aunt's home, but the abuse didn't stop. One day, when she was 16 and alone in the house, her uncle took advantage of the situation. He forced himself on her, taking advantage of her vulnerability. Lineth's eyes darken as she recounts how when she told her aunt about the incident, her aunt blamed her. Instead of protecting her, her aunt began torturing her, treating Lineth as if she had brought this fate upon herself. She had nowhere to turn, no one to help her. These experiences shaped her, but she kept going, surviving each day despite the pain. As the bus continues its journey, Lineth reveals how she eventually moved on with her life, trying to find some semblance of peace. She found work at a local restaurant and made ends meet, but her past haunted her. Then one day, out of the blue, she received a call from her aunt, saying someone named Toto had arrived at their house. Lineth's heart raced. Could it be her brother, the one who had been taken from her all those years ago? A few days later, the man arrived at Lineth's address. Overcome with emotion, Lineth rushed to see him, and when she did, tears filled her eyes. She embraced Toto, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of happiness. Toto had returned, and they were together again. After reuniting with her brother, Lineth moved in with him and his wife, Shion. Shion was a beautiful and charismatic woman, and she quickly formed a close bond with Lineth. For a while, everything seemed to be going well. Lineth found comfort in their friendship and even began to feel like her life was finally starting to turn around. However, what she was missing was the touch of a man. At night, as Lineth lay in bed, she could hear Toto and Shion making love. The sounds awakened something within her, and soon, Lineth found herself unable to control her emotions. Her feelings for her brother, which had always been familial, started to grow into something darker and more complex. Rod interrupts Lineth's story at this point, asking why she's sharing her brother's marital life instead of her own love story. Lineth hesitates for a moment, then drops a bombshell, and revealed that her brother is actually her husband. Hearing this kind of word from Lineth shocked Rod. Confused and horrified, Rod asks her to explain. Lineth takes a deep breath and continues. She explains how over time her feelings for Toto grew stronger, and eventually she confessed them to him. To her surprise, Toto reciprocated those feelings and they began a physical relationship. They started getting close anywhere and anytime. Sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes on top of the lighthouse. They spent their days and nights just enjoying each other. But their secret relationship came crashing down when Lineth discovered she was pregnant. In a panic, Toto decided they couldn't let anyone find out. They made plans to move to a new town where Lineth could give birth in secret. As the months went by, Lineth wrestled with the idea of abortion, but ultimately chose to keep the child. Lineth starts to cry as she tells Rod about the moment she gave birth. It was the most confusing time in her life. She had brought a child into the world, but the circumstances surrounding its conception filled her with shame and guilt. Rod, feeling embarrassed for her, tries to offer comfort, but Lineth brushes it off. At the same time on TV, Lineth watches the news of a murder on the ferry, and a shadow of fear crosses her face. The bus conductor, sensing the discomfort among passengers, switches off the TV, but Lineth can't shake the feeling that this news is somehow connected to her. Rod, noticing her distress, asks her about her child to distract her from the grim thoughts. Lineth revealed that her baby girl is named Lindsay. Rod advised her to rest, eat, and shower at the next stop for the baby's well-being. Lineth then asked Rod for his full name and marital status. He replied that he is single. His full name is Rodolfo Pavallo, and he works as a seaman living in Manila. Upon learning that he was a seaman, Lineth felt melancholic. Rod noticed her distress and asked if his profession bothered her. Lineth recounted her harrowing experience that began on the ferry. She sneaked onto the ferry without paying the fare, but when the guards caught her, they brought her to the chief officer. Instead of punishing her, the officer offered help, but at a cost. He expected something in return, something Lineth didn't want to give. But she was desperate. Lineth, torn between her moral compass and her overwhelming need to get to Manila for her child, agrees to the officer's demands. What followed was a nightmare. The officer took advantage of her, and afterwards he allowed the guards to do the same. After fulfilling their desires, the guards take Lineth to a canteen where they give her food and water. The scene then shifts to the ferry guards chatting with two girls, and all three boarding the ferry. These two girls are actually hookers, and the guards offer them the opportunity to make money on their ship in exchange for something in return. Their tone and body language reveal their true intentions. They expect sexual favors in return for their help. Lineth arrives at the ferry public cabin and meets an old lady. After a brief conversation, she wins the lady's affection and fostering a warm relationship between them. The guards escort the two girls to an empty room and start to intimate with them. On the ferry deck, an old lady shares her traditional medicine skills with Lineth. She secretly reveals that she possesses plants and seeds that are too poisonous for humans, capable of instantly killing a man. Lineth calmly learns all the details about those poisonous plants and medicine. Meanwhile, the guards finish their task with the girls. Minutes later, they return to Lineth and escort her to the captain. The captain does the same with Lineth as the guards do, but this time it breaks Lineth's limit. Rod, horrified by Lineth's confession, bursts out in anger, but Lineth calmly replied, "They are all beasts, and their actions will bring consequences." As Lineth spoke those words, a satisfied smile spread across her face, but Rod does not notice this. Here we see a flashback. After returning from the captain's room, Lineth tearfully goes to the old lady. Sensing the situation and the torture scars on Lineth, the old lady gives her poisonous plants and seeds. After obtaining the poisonous plants, Lineth sets out in search of the captain. He entered a room and saw the guards sitting with girls, drinking alcohol. Finding them in such a drunken state, he decided to teach them a lesson. He grabbed several bottles of alcohol, poured poisonous seeds into each one, and then served the bottles to the guards. The foolish guards, unaware, began gulping down the deadly drink. After learning the captain's location from them, Lineth left to confront him. He knocked on the captain's door with a bottle of alcohol in hand. When Lineth brought the drink, the captain happily accepted it and locked the door. Moments later, the poison began to take effect, and darkness descended upon the captain's vision. One by one, all the criminals lost their lives. On the ferry, Lineth spoke with the old woman, thanking her for her help. Not long after, The ferry returned to the dock, and several policemen rushed aboard. Seeing this, Lineth understood that all those who had crossed her had already lost their lives. Back in the present, Lineth hears the conductor announce that bad weather has stopped their journey. They stop at a lodge, where Rod and Lineth go to a canteen. Rod orders food and water and then buys Lineth a new cell phone, which she gratefully accepts. He then offers her to come with him to his hotel room. Initially, Lineth is embarrassed because there is an underlying tension regarding whether his motives are truly pure, but at last she ultimately agrees. After entering the room, Lineth puts her baby to sleep and then enters the washroom to take a bath. While Lineth is taking her shower, Rod curiously enters the shower room and they share a kiss. Things quickly heat up as they embrace each other to get dirty. Shortly after, Rod and Lineth are seated at a table enjoying their drinks. Lineth expresses her concerns about the situation, explaining that she feels like all men are only interested in her body. She believes that once they have what they want, they abandon her. She mentions that she noticed Rod's inappropriate behavior when they first met, while she was feeding her baby. Hearing Lineth's words, Rod feels embarrassed. Later at night, they sleep together in the motel room. The next morning, Rod wakes up early and notices that Lineth's baby's diaper needs changing. While searching for a new diaper in Lineth's bag, he finds a little medicine bottle. He doesn't pay much attention to this and exchanges the baby's diaper. However, he finds that the baby is a boy, even though Lineth insists it's a girl named Lindsay. Seeing this, he was a bit surprised but didn't give it much thought and proceeded to change the baby's diaper. Later, the motel staff informs Lineth that her bus is about to depart. She rushes back to her room to find Rod but learns that he has already left. After that, we see Lineth continuing her journey on the bus without Rod. The scene shifts and we see Rod happily enjoying his meal with his family. At that moment, Rod saw on the news that the police in the capital city of Sokovia had arrested a 23-year-old girl named Maria Sagum. The girl's brother and sister-in-law had helped the police arrest her. The family claimed that she was mentally unstable. According to the police report, she had stolen a baby from a hospital in Capiz City and fled. Rod's wife was also watching the news with him. Rod noticed that the police had released CCTV footage clearly showing him sitting in a canteen, having a meal with the girl. Seeing this, Rod was completely shocked as he never imagined something like this could happen to him. The girl the police had arrested was none other than Lineth, who was indeed mentally unstable. After losing her baby at birth, she suffered severe emotional trauma and started considering other people's babies as her own. The police suspected that Rod was involved in this kidnapping and that the two of them were selling babies for money. Upon hearing the news, Rod's wife immediately checked his phone and found messages between Rod and Lineth discussing a kidnapping. However, Rod was clueless about these messages. It turned out that while Rod was asleep, Lineth had sent the messages to herself from Rod's phone to frame him. Rod's wife was furious upon seeing the messages and wanted to leave him, taking their children with her. Rod was completely bewildered by the situation. Meanwhile, Lineth was at the police station, giving a statement claiming that she had killed all the guards on the ferry. She also accused Rod of being the mastermind behind everything and requested the police to search Rod's bag as evidence. At that moment, the police arrived at Rod's house and arrested him on charges of murder and kidnapping. When the police searched Rod's bag, they found the poisonous seed and the plant used to kill the guards. In this situation, Rod didn't know what to do. Seeing no other way out, Rod tries to escape, but the police quickly react, ordering him to stop. When he doesn't comply, they shoot him, and Rod falls to the ground, bleeding, his life in shambles. Meanwhile, we see Lineth sitting in the interrogation room, smirking and saying, "If you abandon me after using my body, you won't live to see tomorrow." With her sinister smile, the movie ends here.